Hello, my name is Rad, and in this video I'm going to talk about Power BI Datamart, the new feature added in Power BI, announced in Microsoft Build by Arun, which Power BI team has been working with it for a long time, which is called Power BI Datamart. What it is, how you can use it, what are the use case of it. Let's check it out. So this is the starting point of four videos about Datamart I'm going to explain. This is the first video which talks about why and what. What is Power BI Datamart and why we should use it or who should use it. In the other three videos, we'll have demos of what the Datamart is, how you get started with that. So to understand the Datamart first, you need to understand what is the journey that Power BI took, or many other, let's say, self-service BI tools. In the market these days, the reason that Power BI and some other self-service BI tools are so popular is that the need for citizen data analyst has grown. So organizations, they have had BI team developing their BI solution that took a lot of time, bottleneck on the BI team, requests from all other teams to build a solution. Now with a tool like Power BI or any self-service BI tool, the promise of Power BI was actually the same thing as well, that it enables the citizen data analyst, someone who is not a developer, someone who may not be able to write, let's say, SQL code, someone who doesn't have a developer background, but understands the data, understand the business, understand how data of this business works, can connect to that data, build a report or dashboard and analyze that data. And that is what Power BI is doing really great. If you don't know anything about BI, if you just download Power BI Desktop, it's really easy to work with it. You can easily connect to a data set, build reports and dashboards. There are situations that you might need a calculation that might need work, but in most of the cases, it's just very easy to get started. You can see a couple of videos, read a couple of articles, and get started without having any background in development or BI or anything like that. That has been the goal of Power BI. But after spending some time in the world of Power BI let's say spending a couple of years building Power BI solutions, building multiple Power BI solutions, you realize that Power BI itself might not be enough. I mean, building everything inside Power BI might not be enough. It might cause some challenges. For example, if you build everything inside one Power BI file, what if you need this table now in another file? And this is a table you created through some data transformations. You built this product table, now you need it in another PBIX file. How you can share that between these two files, which then would require the minimum amount of maintenance. How, if you want to use a measure across multiple reports, how you would do things like that. I have explained previously about other components in Power BI, such as shared data sets, such as data flow, and Power BI is a great tool combining all of these components together. I explained how you can separate different layers of development in Power BI. You can build the data transformation using something called data flow, which connects to data sources. It builds the transformation using Power Query Engine, and then once that is done, it stores it as CSV file in Azure Data Lake. Then shared data set is pretty much a Power BI data set that reads data from the result of that, and then builds calculations, relationships, measures, and then Power BI reports with the live connection to that shared data set. This is like a way that you design a Power BI solution that is reusable and can be enhanced a lot in the future. If you are multiple developers working at the same time, you can use this approach. If you want to reuse a table, such as product table that I mentioned, the date table that I mentioned, you can do that all with this environment, because it gives you the ability to reuse things. Now, this solution is not yet fully complete. There are still things that can be added to that. Like, what if you really need to have a repository for your data. Data flow at the moment stores data as CSV file, but what if you really need a database to store this data? You might call it data warehouse, you may call it any names, dimensional model, data storage, but storage that you store this data, this will give you a lot of capabilities in the future as well. And if you can combine the data flow to feed data into that database and then read from that database into the shared dataset, that would make your Power BI architecture much more complete and everything much easier to work with. And that is where the idea of the Power BI Datamart comes in. So what is a Power BI Datamart? Power BI Datamart is a combination of a few components. First, it's a data flow. It reads data from source, does all the data flow transformation, which is Power Query transformation, builds the tables in a way that it needed, but it does not store it in Azure Data Lake. It stores it in Azure SQL database. So Datamart also includes a database, an Azure SQL database, which you can consider it as like your data warehouse. Now, whenever I say data warehouse, there are some comments, feedback. I hear that, well, Power BI is not great for data warehouse. For data warehouse, we should have Synapse and things like that. The data warehouse that I'm talking about is the conceptual design of the tables itself, the physical place to store this data of the tables in a star schema way, in a way that we build reporting on of it. Now, this can be tables like with hundreds of rows. This can be tables with hundreds of millions of rows. The size of it is not deterministic to call it a data warehouse or not. This storage to store your BI data in a dimensional way, in a star schema way, that is what we call it, a data warehouse. That is the terminology that Kimball also uses for a data warehouse. Now, if data warehouse is really big, it goes into a very large scale, then you might use technologies like Azure Synapse or other technologies for that. But here I'm talking about data warehouse as any types of storage, right? So you can store the data, actually Datamart will do that for you, store it in Azure SQL database, and then finally also a data set that populates data or import data from that Azure SQL database into the analytical model of analysis services. That is what the Power BI dataset behind the scene is, with all the relationships, calculations, DAX measures, and everything like that. So Datamart is actually these three components together: data flow, a data warehouse that is behind the scene Azure SQL database, and the dataset. Now, another good thing about Datamart is that it's not just those separate components together. It also comes with a UI, with a web UI, which you can actually use across this whole area. You can use that web UI to get data from source, to do the data transformation, to look at your database, to query the data from the database, and also to build your data set, the relationship measures, calculations, all in Power BI web UI. So that is the Datamart. Datamart is a combination of these three components: data flow, data warehouse, and data set. In addition to that web UI, a unified web UI, a unified experience to build all of that. That makes the whole Datamart what it is, right? Now, Datamart is just at the beginning and it would enhance a lot in the future. But let's, now that we know what the Datamart is, talk about who the Datamart is for, because and that is what this video is about. That is, this video is talking about should you use Datamart or should someone else use Datamart, or what is the situation that you would use Datamart for it. Now, I start this with like first three sample scenarios, and then we'll talk about features of a Datamart. So first, consider this person. Let's say Daniel is a citizen data analyst. He is coming from business background, finance background. He does have a good experience in the business he's working in, but he's not a developer. He does not know how to write SQL code. He does not know how to create a SQL database. If he wants to create a SQL database, he needs to install SQL Server Management Studio, or should he do something else? Should he go to Azure SQL, Azure portal and create an Azure SQL database, or should he go and install SQL Server on premises, or should he go and create a whole new use a whole different vendor for database technologies. He is not a developer who have this like skill set and does not also have the time to go and learn these skill set. So for someone like him, and on the other hand side, he also realized that he need data storage for the data, so that the data comes in here, it gets stored and then can be reused not only in this file but many other files. What is the solution? Power BI Datamart enables this user or empowers Daniel to build this solution easily because it's all part of Datamart. He does not need to go and open Management Studio. He does not need to go and open any other tools. He does not need any other licenses. All of that is packaged in a Datamart. So he just builds the Datamart in the same way that he builds a Power BI dataset, or in the same way that he does transformation in Power Query. And that would be part of his solution. His solution would be more governed, and it would be the right way of building solution rather than having everything in one single file. Another example, let's say Peter is a data analyst, but he's working in a large enterprise. So in his organization, he's not the only one doing BI and data analysis. Their organization might have already a BI team. Their BI team includes some BI developers, BI admins. They are in charge of building a centralized data model. And Peter is like normally when there's a requirement for Peter to build a report, Peter connects to the data, to the, let's say, data model that built by this BI team with a live connection from his Power BI report, and he builds visualization on top of it. Sometimes he also writes report level measures. But if he needs a new data source to come in or change the way that data works or the relationships or things like that, he needs to send a request to the BI team. And it's not just Peter. There are a lot of other people in that organization who would also need that. So Datamart helps in that case as well, because one of the fears of the BI team to not give access, or let's say not add that in their process for the data analysts to go and build their own solution, is that then how those solutions can be governed. There is no data storage for that. There is no governance around it. But now with the Datamart, he can go and build a data mart that gets part of data from this centralized data model and other parts from other places, and still it's a data mart. It's a derived data mart from this data mart with adding some extra features, extra tables, extra calculations in it, and it is governed. So it helps both Peter as a business analyst and also the BI team. The third situation is if someone is a developer. If James is a developer in a company, he is a BI developer. He writes SQL code. He does things with the SQL database directly. Now with Datamart, not only he can use that unified web UI, he can also connect directly to the SQL database, Azure SQL database behind the scene. He can connect directly using the XMLI endpoint to the Power BI dataset as analysis services dataset. You can connect to any of these and add his own, let's say, extra development edition in it using Tabular Editor, for example, for Power BI dataset, using SQL Server Management Studio for the Azure SQL database and anything like that. So he is a developer, but he has all the functionalities that he needs to work with the components of this Datamart. So this is like 3 examples of 3 different personas. They would get benefit from the Datamart. Now, what are the features of Datamart? As I said, I'm not showing you a demo in this video, but I'm explaining those features to you. What are the features that empowers the Power BI development? I'll explain them one by one. First, Datamart completes the BI ecosystem. That 3-layer architecture that I showed you, it can be definitely much better if you consider it as a 4 layers of architecture, where the actual storage of the data is a database. Datamart builds the first 3 layer basically for you. Using Datamart, you have the data flow, getting data from sources, doing data transformation. Now that data stores in Azure SQL database, and then a data set associated with that Datamart, which Datamart actually builds it, will import data from that Azure SQL database and does all the calculations and relationships, everything with it. And then we have the layer of visualization. Now, this is not just, let's say, adding a new database. So you shouldn't consider Datamart as just, let's say, a database added. It's not like that. It's a lot of other things as well. For example, one of the things that you would always need to consider if you worked with data flow and data sets separately is that you schedule your data flow to refresh at 8 a.m. Then what time you schedule your data set to refresh? Perhaps 9 a.m. What if the refresh of this does not finish until 9 a.m.? What if you want to refresh this right after the data flow refresh finishes? At the moment, a lot of people do that with some APIs, like using Power Automate. When the refresh of that is finished, kick off the refresh of this. Now with Datamart, this is all built in. You just set up one scheduled refresh for all of these. At that point, data will be populated from data flow, from the data source using data flow, imported in SQL database, then from SQL database imported into the Power BI dataset, all with one configuration. Same for the incremental refresh configuration. You just do that in one place. Row level security configuration, you just do that in one place. This helps you to build that in one configuration. So it is not just that that multi-layers of implementation. It is also a unified place that you would use for building all of that. It's a simple web UI that you use, very similar to Power BI Desktop, and that is the new way of building Power BI solutions. This is really empowering all the users. A lot of things about it is helpful. One thing is that Power BI Desktop at the moment can be only installed in Windows application, where when you have a web UI, you can use it anywhere that you have a web browser, any web browser. And this web UI gives you all the functionalities. At the moment, some of the functionalities are still missing, and very soon you'll be able to do pretty much everything that you do in Power BI Desktop in Power BI web editor environment. But this Datamart web editor is a single unified place to do all of that, to connect to the data, to build your data transformation, to query the data from the database, to create relationships, as you see the diagram view in here, and all of the things around it. Those are all very easily possible. One other thing about Datamart is that, well, it has different components. It builds the Azure SQL database behind the scene, but you don't need a license for that. You don't need to pay for that database technology separately. That is the good thing about it. Of course, Datamart comes in premium licenses at the moment. It comes in PPU, premium per user, or premium capacity-based workspaces. You can only create Datamarts into these. But if you have any of these licenses, especially premium per user, which you can even apply for a free trial these days if you want, then you have everything you need. You have the Azure SQL database behind the scene for that. You don't need to go to Azure portal. You don't need to go and buy a subscription. You don't need to do anything else to get those components you want. They are all part of this Power BI license for you. One other thing which I really like about this Datamart is that it's not the features that it has today. It's the features that it might have in the future. There is a lot of things that might come if you have a database to store the data, a repository to store the data. Then many other things might come. For example, slowly changing dimension. That is one of the things that we have support in an actual data warehouse. Because it's an actual data warehouse, you can have multiple records, depends on the type of SCD. One record that is obsolete, it has an end date, effective start and end date. Another record with effective start, which has the most up-to-date values. You get the history, you get the up-to-date values as well. You have all of access to build all of these pretty much. I'm not saying that it is available right now, but these would be things that can come in Power BI in the future because now we have a database storage. Inferred dimension member processes in ETL, the log and monitoring of data flow. At the moment, if you set up incremental refresh, you don't know that, like last night, was that 50 rows imported into this table or 49 rows? Where is those data? Like, can you monitor it, compare it with the amount of rows imported like the night before that? You don't have these capabilities because there is no database, there is no data storage. So these can come in the future. The web UI enables multi-developer experience. I'm not saying again now, I'm saying like in the future, you would definitely get much easier ability to do multi-development, version controlling, a lot of things like that can come. These are not available at the moment in Power BI Datamart, but I'm pretty sure this would be the start of a revolution to bring all of those inside Power BI, and that is very exciting. Power BI Datamart also comes with governance. If you want to set an endorsement for it, if you want to set sensitivity labels in a way that someone outside of organization should not access this data, even if by mistake this data is shared with that person, you have the ability to do all of these. So at the end, Datamart is not just for one person. It's not just for business analysts, citizen data analyst. It's not just for developer. It's for everyone. It's a new revolution. It's a new way of building Power BI solution. And what I see based on my experience since the beginning of Power BI, I would say this is one of the most major features added into the Power BI, which really helps development. It really helps the architecture of your Power BI solution. It really helps the different persona of users, a business analyst, a developer, everyone to use it and have a better Power BI implementation. Now, there are 3 other articles that I would also suggest you to go and have a look, videos actually in this case, because I have those as a YouTube videos as well. In this video, I didn't show you a demo, but in the next video, you'll see a full demo of how to create a Datamart, what are things that needed for that. The video after that, I'll explain what are the components of a Datamart, and then after that, the Datamart integration in a Power BI ecosystem, how it works with other things such as deployment pipeline and governance and anything around it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until the next video, have fun.